The forest had gone quiet long before we realized something was wrong. Not the gentle quiet that comes with nightfall, but the heavy kind that presses against your ears and makes your thoughts sound too loud. Even the fire seemed nervous, its flames twitching low as if afraid to be noticed. Mark joked that we should have stayed at the motel down the highway. Nobody laughed. We had hiked farther than we meant to, chasing the promise of a lake that never appeared. By the time we admitted we were lost, the sun had already fallen behind the trees. So we pitched the tent in the first patch of ground that looked flat enough, a cheap orange dome surrounded by miles of black timber. That was when we heard the first step. It was faint, soft, somewhere beyond the reach of the firelight, a single crunch of leaves that might have been an animal or just the woods settling for the night. We all paused, listening harder than we wanted to. Mark called out a weak hello, like an idiot daring the dark to answer. Nothing replied. The silence returned thicker than before. Emily zipped the tent halfway and said we should turn in. No one argued. Inside, the nylon walls felt too thin. Every movement outside brushed against them like fingertips. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, following the shadows of branches dragged across the fabric by the wind, trying to convince myself that was all it was. Then came another step. Closer this time, deliberate, circling, not the quick scatter of a deer, not the shuffle of something. Small, this had weight, intention, patience. I could picture it just beyond the tent, moving slowly, considering us. Mark whispered that it was probably a ranger, but rangers use flashlights. They used voices. They didn't walk in silent loops around people who were obviously afraid. The steps continued, unhurried, carving a path in the leaves around our little shelter. One full circle, then another. Emily reached for my arm in the dark and squeezed hard enough to hurt. "Do you hear that?" she breathed. I did, and whatever was out there knew we did too. Because the footsteps stopped right beside my head, and something exhaled through the fabric. Asterisk, no one moved after the breath touched the tent. It was warm and damp, close enough that I could see the nylon push inward with it. I felt my heart beat. In my teeth, Mark whispered that it had to be a bear. But bears snorted and huffed and pawed. They didn't breathe like a person trying not to be heard. The thing dragged a slow line along the tent wall. Not claws, not fur, fingers. Emily began to cry without making a sound. Her grip on my arm trembled. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, but lying felt impossible. The fingers kept moving, tracing the seams, learning the shape of our temporary home. When they reached the zipper, they paused. The whole world paused with them. I expected the sudden rip, the violent tear, the chaos of it bursting through. Instead, the hand tapped twice, polite, curious, almost playful. Mark muttered that we should shout, scare it away. But none of us wanted to give it proof of exactly where we were, as if it didn't already know. The steps resumed, continuing the circle. But slower now, satisfied. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time lost its meaning inside that thin orange skin. Sleep became something from another lifetime. Finally, the footsteps drifted farther into the trees, fading until they dissolved into the distance, leaving only the crackle of the dying fire. Mark laughed then, too loud, too fast, said we were freaking ourselves out over nothing, said the woods were full of weird echoes. No one believed him, but we pretended to, because the alternative was packing up and running blind through miles of forest in the dark. So we lay back down, eyes open, breathing shallow. I told myself it was over. Whatever curiosity had circled us, had moved on. That was when a new set of footsteps answered from the opposite side of the camp, and another from behind us, and another, slow, measured, converging. We weren't being visited, we were being surrounded. The fire collapsed into embers as the steps gathered beyond the light. I could hear at least 3 of them now, maybe more, moving carefully, communicating without speaking. Mark crawled toward the door and whispered that we had to run. Emily shook her head violently. Run where? Into who? A shape passed in front of the tent, blocking what little moonlight filtered through the trees, tall, wrong, bending in places. That bodies shouldn't bend, gone before I could focus on it. Then another shape crossed, slower, limping almost, like it wore a person badly. Something brushed the top of the tent, palms sliding over the curve, feeling for structure, for weakness. I bit my knuckle to stop from screaming. A voice drifted from the dark, soft, careful, practicing. "Hello," it said. It was Mark's voice. Mark froze beside me. I felt him shaking his head. He hadn't spoken. "Hello," the woods repeated. Closer to Emily this time, shaping the word like it had just learned how mouths worked. Another voice tried, higher, trembling, my voice. They had listened earlier, collected us, stored the sounds away. Now they were trying them on. The zipper trembled under a tentative tug, not opening, just testing what it did. Emily whispered that they wanted us to answer. They wanted conversation. Permission Mark covered his mouth, refusing to give them anything else to steal. The copies continued around the tent, calling softly, patient as teachers. I realized then the footsteps had never truly left. They had only gone to gather the rest. The forest beyond them remained utterly silent. No insects, no wind. Nothing alive that wasn't part of the circle tightening around us. And beneath the voices, almost too low to notice, I could hear them breathing together, practicing how to be human. At some point, exhaustion dragged my eyes closed. Not sleep, just escape. A mercy offered by a body that could not stay terrified forever. I woke to sunlight pressing warm against the tent, birds arguing in the trees like nothing had ever happened. For a moment, I thought we had imagined it all. Mark was already unzipping the door, laughing in relief, talking about how stupid we'd feel later. Emily didn't laugh. She stared at him with confusion folding across her face. Because Mark was still lying beside us, cold exactly where he had been all night. Eyes wide open, the zipper continued to open. From the outside, morning poured in, bright and harmless. Framing the silhouette waiting there, it wore Mark perfectly. Every detail borrowed, every freckle remembered. It smiled down at us with a mouth that understood the shape but not the meaning. Behind it, the forest was full of others, wearing us. Dozens of attempts standing quietly among the trees. The one at the entrance tilted its head, practicing concern. "You heard footsteps," it said in Mark's voice. "We came to help." Real Mark made a broken sound beside me, a noise the copies hadn't learned yet. They all leaned closer when he made it. Hungry students. I understood then why they circled, why they listened, why they repeated. They weren't hunters, they were replacements. And they had finally gotten us right. The one in the doorway reached down and took my hand. Gentle, triumphant. "Come out," it said. Around the camp, dozens of familiar faces waited for us to join. Them, and somewhere in the woods, new footsteps began searching for another tent.